Hi, and welcome to Last Chance to See, Episode 3, West Michigan.
Your Chance to See explores the hypothesis that we have some pretty spectacular nature right in our own backyards. Unlike nature programming that takes us off to faraway places to see amazing wildlife in all corners of the planet that we may never get the access to, there's amazing wildlife right in our backyards. And this is my attempt to demonstrate to you and to me that we all have the opportunity to engage with that nature and help protect it. To help me do this, I've selected haphazard locations around the country using darts and a dartboard. Have a look. I'm using the map on that, the broad side of the barn. Hopefully I can hit it, and darts. So let's begin. Northeastern Wyoming. Right up there in Wisconsin. Alaska, we'll take it. Having selected these locations, I now consult with local experts and talk with them about nature in their area. These local experts will share what they think is special about their locations. And together, I hope this series convinces us that we all have nature in our backyard, nature that we have a chance to protect. I hope you enjoy the series.
Today I talked to Executive Director Kim Karn and Advancement Director Marie Ortenberger of the Land Conservancy of West Michigan, and Chris Hoving of the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. I started by asking Kim and Marie where they like to go. So, what are your favorite places?
That's like asking if you have a favorite child, Mark, but
It is, isn't it?
I've been getting out to Salt Lake Bog just because it's kind of closer to where I am in eastern Kent County, and it's just remarkable. You can get out and get lost in the tall prairie grass. You can get out onto the actual bog itself. I'm from Colorado, so seeing the bog is new for me, and it seems magical. There's plants that grow on there. There's beautiful birds that live out there. I think that the cranes that are living there now weren't there 10 years ago. So to see that there's new habitat for their homes and migration is very, very powerful to me. So I love getting out there to Salt Lake Bog.
Marie.
Yeah. Oh boy, it is a difficult question to answer. I also love Salt Lake Bog, but I think lately my favorite place to go has been Upriver Nature Preserve. It's a bit more of a drive for me. I have to drive an hour to get up there, but it is very rewarding. The Little South branch of the Pere Marquette River runs through there. There's about 2 miles of trail that just go through these beautiful ravines and forests, and it transitions from kind of this deciduous forest into a more conifer, cedar forest. And then in the fall, salmon come to spawn. And that's just such a spectacle. It's so cool to see. Every time I go there, I feel like I could just stand by the river for like an hour and stare at it. You spend time in a space like that, you come away and you're just in a completely new, calmer mindset. So I really treasure that place.
Yeah. So, where are the places you like to go now?
I always like going to the lakeshore. I really enjoy Saugatuck State Park, probably one of my favorites, although I recently discovered Muskegon State Park, also really, really nice. They're both on the shoreline of Lake Michigan. Oh, I'm absolutely obsessed with prairie fens. They're just so fantastic. I was introduced to them when I started working for the DNR. I was a private lands biologist. So I would help private landowners do wildlife projects on their properties. And our grant was focused on wetlands. It was focused on endangered species. And in Michigan, a lot of our endangered species are either found in fens or they're found in oak savannas, which are like halfway between a grassland and a forest.
Next, I asked Chris about how people can help. I got a very interesting answer. Let's hear. How can people get involved in helping protect these special areas of Western Michigan?
So there are a couple ways, and I'll go with the one that folks might not be expecting and then sort of go on from there. But I think the main one is just to shoot something, which sounds odd, but almost all of the species are managed by state agencies. And state agencies are funded primarily through taxes on guns and ammunition and archery equipment, but it's hunting equipment. But it's not like just hunting equipment. If you buy a pistol and go to a shooting range, you're supporting wildlife conservation. But gosh, there's nothing more fun than actually being there while a prairie or an oak savanna is being restored with fire. It's a really neat experience. So that would be my second one. And the third one would be getting involved with like eBird or iNaturalist, or Merlin would be another one. But one of these apps that helps you learn to identify things. I think using those apps, they're very user friendly. It's a great way to do it. And we also, as a conservation organization, use the data from those apps to then target conservation on the landscape.
Next, I dug in a little deeper on what these folks are doing to help nature in their corner of the world. Joining me today are two folks from the Land Conservancy of Western Michigan, Kim Karn and Marie Ortenberger, and I'm going to allow them to introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do with the organization. Kim, can we start with you first?
Sure. Thanks, Mark. I'm really glad to be here. I'm the Executive Director of the Land Conservancy of West Michigan.
I'm Marie Ortenberger. I'm the Advancement Manager for the Land Conservancy of West Michigan.
Tell me a bit about the organization, its history, and where you're at.
Sure. So we're coming up upon a pretty exciting milestone. We're getting ready to celebrate our 50th anniversary as a land trust. So that's really exciting. And we do our work in a variety of different ways. Our three main tools that we have are conservation easements, and we have around 126 of those across our service area.
The Land Conservancy of West Michigan covers most of the area around where my dart landed. This Land Conservancy began in 1976 with 4 hearty volunteers. Currently, it serves 8 counties and about a 70-mile range north to south, with my dart about in the middle, and from about where my dart landed over to the shores of Lake Michigan to the west. The Land Conservancy is headquartered in Grand Rapids and have the handy web address of www.naturenearby.org. I then asked Kim and Marie if their conservancy had any urban reserves. They told me an interesting story of their partnership with the local nature center.
When I'm thinking of urban, I like to think of our Highlands natural area. It's a partnership with the Blandford Nature Center, and it's right here in West Grand Rapids. And it's definitely an urban type of conservation situation. It used to be a golf course for over 100 years, and we were able to acquire that property, and we're in the process of bringing it back to nature. So it's been about 8 years of really hard work, putting in tallgrass prairies, over 11 wetlands, and taking out some of the unnatural structures there to return it to nature. And it's a really cool project. I personally really like it because a lot of people are out there from the city, and it really does demonstrate to our community what people can do to help nature get back into its original kind of state, a more natural-like state. So I really like the hope that brings to everyone who has worked on that project. It's pretty special.
And this loops back to something Chris told me about his connection to nature centers. Chris, today we're talking about Western Michigan, and the first thing I wanted to ask you is what inspires you about the nature of this part of the country?
Well, I mean, I grew up in West Michigan, so this is the nature that sort of got me hooked on nature. I grew up actually in the inner city part of Grand Rapids, in a working class neighborhood, and didn't have that much access to nature per se. I mean, I could go to a city park that was mowed, and that was about as close as it got for me. In 6th grade, I was invited to a magnet school now, an environmental science magnet school, and the school was adjacent to a nature center, and so every day we would do all of our schoolwork in half the day, and then the other half of the day we would do environmental education programming at the nature center. And it was by far the best, school year of my life, because I was in the woods all the time, and it was really eye-opening to me. And just I grew to love, the nature, the wetlands, the forest, all the wildlife of Western Michigan. That really is what got me hooked.
Getting back to the Land Conservancy of West Michigan, I asked Marie about volunteers.
The activities range from removing invasive species. Right now in the winter, we're working on removing glossy buckthorn from a prairie fen habitat, as well as removing, garlic mustard in the spring. But our volunteers also support with trail building. And in the fall, one of my favorite things that we get to do with volunteers is collect seeds in our prairie restoration project at Salt Lake Bog, and then later spread seeds to expand habitat, our native tallgrass habitat at Salt Lake Bog Nature Preserve, as well as other preserves.
And then I asked about the Karner blue butterfly. Let me set the stage. The Karner blue is a federally listed endangered species. The butterfly is wholly dependent upon the blue lupin as a food source. The species has a very broad range east to west. It formerly went from Vermont all the way over to Minnesota. That's contracted a little bit, but a very narrow north to south range. And that with climate change, the species is not doing well on the southern portion of its range. And so this has led to conversations about whether to shift the species, both the butterfly and its lupin, further northwards. This is a novel, controversial management technique called managed relocation or conservation introductions. It's something I've done some research on. It's something that Chris and I have connected on earlier. And my dart landed just east of something called the Karner Blue Sanctuary. Do you manage habitat for Karner Blue?
So we have one nature preserve where Karner blue has been documented. That's Moss Family Nature Preserve in Kent County. At our other nature preserves, we're working to restore habitat to support Karner blue butterflies, but they are a keystone species that does guide a lot of that decision making. So on here in the Eastern Glacial Corridor, we have our Wege Foundation Natural Area where we're restoring a lot of oak savanna habitat. Brower Lake Nature Preserve, similar projects are happening. And then up north, where the main stronghold for Karner blue butterfly is in Newaygo County, we have a couple nature preserves that neighbor a federally protected forest land that we're working to connect existing oak savanna restoration efforts with the work that we're doing.
This reminded me of something that Chris was saying about volunteer observations. And my conversation with Kim and Marie took a turn in that direction as well.
Yeah. So last year we partnered with the John Ball Zoo, which is our local zoo, and they hosted a city nature challenge for Grand Rapids and just broader West Michigan area. It encompassed, I think, like 4 West Michigan counties. And we invited people to use iNaturalist to just have a bio blitz, identify as many species as they can. So it's a really important way to engage people with just understanding what life exists in our area, in our backyard.
So thanks to Kim and Marie for sharing and to the Land Conservancy of West Michigan, which provided all the pretty pictures that you have been seeing in this presentation.
So I recommend everyone check out our website, naturenearby.org. There's a really great interactive explore tool where you can see all of our different nature preserves and explore nature nearby in West Michigan. Really beautiful nature preserves and a great opportunity to, be intrepid and get out into nature on your own.
Now back to my conversation with Chris. Could you tell us a bit about your work with the Michigan DNR and what are the conservation challenges that you're wrestling with these days?
Oh, thank you, Mark. Yeah, I'd be glad to. So I some people joke that I tend to take on the lost causes in the conservation world. So I was the endangered species coordinator for the state of Michigan for 4 years, and then transitioned over into working on climate change and climate adaptation in particular. And so I really sort of am gravitated to the big challenges, something where even if you can move the needle a little bit, because it's such a big challenge, it's really going to have a measurable impact on wildlife conservation. So yeah, we've got there's no shortage of challenges right now. I think the main one, or the main two, I think I'd want to focus on. One is that we're in a funding crisis.
Chris reported that the situation for non-game species is not great. Apparently, about 90% of the funds that come in through the tax on hunting and fishing equipment that he was talking about goes to managing hunted and fished species, with about 10% going to managing non-game species.
The other challenge, I think, getting specific to my job and looking at the challenge of adapting to a changing climate, helping the wildlife adapt to a changing climate. The biggest problem I'm finding is actually lack of imagination. So usually what we want to do when we're adapting to climate change is we want to do incremental change to the conservation programs that we already have. So, if we're doing prairie restoration, let's try to increase the amount of prairie restoration that we do by 2% or 3%. But often when we look at what are the impacts from climate change, they're much larger in scope than that. We might be looking at, a need to restore.
And here we had a long conversation about the challenges of climate adaptation management. This is a research interest of mine and a management interest for Chris, and where our professional lives have crossed paths. Chris and I also got around to talking about Karner blue butterflies, as Chris is the DNR expert on the species.
Okay, so yeah, I've been working with the Karner blue butterfly since, well, really since I started with the DNR back in 2003. So it's been, over 20 years working on this species, working with the recovery team nationally. And over time, as sort of my duties have shifted into climate change, I've been asking questions about, what's the climate vulnerability of this species?
And then we loop back to things one might shoot, specifically turkeys. And I have a little bit to say about that. I was in my late 20s before I ever saw a turkey. They were very rare when I was young. And now they've become very common. I see turkeys almost every day. They're all over our campus. They're all over town. Wow, they have made a comeback across most of the country.
It's one reason that I like to work with the Karner blue butterfly in particular. And that is because the habitat requirements for the Karner blue butterfly overlap so well with the wild turkeys. And so one selling point that we often bring with this is if we bring this species into an area, then we will also be bringing a commitment to be doing habitat management for wild turkey to this area. And we'll be diversifying the funding sources that we can use to manage for this oak savanna habitat, to use not just for a game species, but also used for a non-game species. We now have, I won't say it's twice as much because 90% of our budget is game species, but it gives us another 10% that we could use to manage these areas. And so, yeah, having the species matched so well with a popular game species, I think, is what makes this one possible as far as social acceptance goes.
And I want to thank Chris from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources for taking the time out to chat with me. So that's a wrap on West Michigan. Thanks for watching through to the end. Stay tuned for episode 4.